2 weeks ago, the Trump administration repealed a crucial part of the Endangered Species Act, finalizing a new rule that will open habitats of imperiled wildlife to development, logging, mining, and other uses. The legislation has helped safeguard more than 1,700 species and their habitats, preventing 99% of those listed from going extinct. And last year, the Trump administration embarked on a large-scale initiative to dismantle decades of environmental progress. So today, just about a year and a half into Trump's presidency, I'll be recording just about every major anti-wildlife action his administration has taken so far. It's worth noting that in Trump's first term, the Center for Biological Diversity filed 266 lawsuits challenging his administration's anti-wildlife policies, winning 90% of them. I seriously doubt people support killing off whole species of animals, especially not through illegal actions, so I hope you'll consider this going into the midterms and all future elections after them. Starting from the beginning, in April 2025, the Trump administration eliminated penalties for incidental animal deaths from industrial activities like oil drilling or wind operations, even when harm is foreseeable and preventable. For decades, courts held companies accountable for negligent practices under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and removing liability gets rid of incentives for simple safeguards like covering pits or switching off tower lights, despite evidence that such things kill millions of birds annually. Also in April of 2025, the Department of Agriculture declared roughly 60% of U.S. Forest Service lands to be emergency timber and management zones, bypassing standard environmental review processes, the requirement for public notice, and environmental impact statements before moving forward with development. This move comes on the heels of Trump's executive order to expand timber production in the country by 25%. On October 6th, the Trump administration approved the Ambler Access Project, fast-tracking permits for a 211-mile private industrial mining road through the Brooks Range and gates of the Arctic National Park, threatening one of America's most fragile wilderness areas, as well as lands that have sustained indigenous communities for generations. On October 21st, the U.S. Department of the Interior disclosed plans to permanently eliminate more than 2,000 positions across the U.S. Geological Survey, Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service regional offices, and Interior headquarters, gunning conservation and research capacity that works on everything from wildlife protection to land management. And 2 days later, they opened Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to oil and gas drilling, which is one of the planet's last intact ecosystems. On November 17th, the Department of the Interior rescinded the 2024 Bureau of Land Management safeguards governing the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska. This cleared the way for aggressive industrial expansion across 23 million acres of public lands and the single largest ecologically intact landscape in the U.S. On February 3rd, the Department of the Interior began conducting more oil lease sales in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and on February 19th, the Trump administration announced plans to offer 80.4 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico for oil and gas leasing in August as part of their atrocious tax bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. As part of that atrocious bill, they also mandated at least two Gulf lease sales per year through 2039, committing vast public waters to another decade of aggressive pollution and risking already vulnerable Gulf Coast ecosystems. On March 11th, they proposed a rule shielding oil and gas operators from liability for harming or killing protected polar bears and Pacific walruses on Alaska's North Slope. The proposal is still waiting to be finalized as of today, but just a week later, they sold $163 million worth of sensitive lands in Alaskan reservations, totaling roughly 1.3 million acres, of course, further harming already at risk wildlife and ecosystems. And on March 31st, Trump convened a committee to vote to exempt Gulf of Mexico drilling from key Endangered Species Act protections. The so-called God Squad has the power to condemn an endangered species to extinction, and their vote on this move puts federally listed species like the Rice's whale, manatees, and 5 species of sea turtles at risk of extinction. On April 3rd, the U.S. Forest Service announced its closing of 57 of its 77 research facilities across 31 states, derailing research to understanding the causes of and best ways to combat wildfires. On May 6th, the Department of the Interior transferred 1.4 million acres along Alaska's Dalton Utility Corridor to state authority, clearing the way for industrial development and furthering the damage they continue to cause to sensitive Arctic ecosystems. On May 11th, they repealed the Bureau of Land Management's Public Lands Rule, which required that conservation be weighed alongside mining, drilling, timber, and grazing across 245 million acres of public lands. The rule was finalized in 2024 with more than 90% of public commenters in support. On July 7th, they announced they will hold another Gulf of Mexico oil and gas lease sale on August 12th, offering roughly 80 million acres for drilling, continuing the administration's effort to expand fossil fuel development on public waters. And on July 10th, they approved a permit for a 10-mile road through Alaska's Izembek National Wildlife Refuge, causing lasting damage to migratory bird habitats while ignoring 3 pending federal lawsuits. The same day, the White House finalized the rule I talked about at the beginning of this video, which ends virtually all habitat protections for endangered species. The rule narrowed ESA protections by excluding habitat destruction from the law's definition of harm, a complete departure from how the law has been interpreted for decades. This is by far the worst anti-wildlife policy in modern U.S. history, and caps off Trump's ongoing attack on fragile animals and ecosystems in America as we head into the midterms. Now, it's really worth noting that most of this is entirely unnecessary, as the US was already producing historic levels of oil before Trump took office, so his harmful drill baby drill agenda is just as pointless as it is reckless. The US has also led global wood markets for years now, so his trampling of valuable forests is just as dumb. So one really has to wonder why the Trump administration insists on these anti-wildlife policies, other than just for the purposes of private and corporate profit and convenience. Thankfully, though, groups like the Center for Biological Diversity continue to push back on Trump's disgusting policies, filing 121 suits defending life from his harmful actions so far. So before I end the video, I want to ask you all to help because there are at least a few ways you can. So first, federal agencies like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service are legally required to review public comments when they're proposing rules, and massive public opposition can be used by legal teams in court to challenge illegal rollbacks, like the ones Trump loves so much. You can and should sign up for alerts from groups like the Center for Biological Diversity, Earth Justice, and Defenders of Wildlife so you can submit comments and sign petitions very easily. They usually give a template message that you can send to your local representatives. You can also donate to these groups directly to fund their lawsuits. And definitely don't forget to vote. The impact on animals and ecosystems around us are very often overlooked in our electoral choices, but I ask that you please consider these issues more in elections going forward, as harmful policies like the ones discussed in this video lead to the death of billions of animals as well as the destruction of whole ecosystems over time, and I really don't think anybody wants that. And of course, please share this video with your friends so they're aware and might help too. I focused only on wildlife impacts in this short video, but it's also important to be aware of and account for all of the harmful impacts Trump's policies will continue to have on clean water, air, human health, and so forth. So yeah, thanks for watching the video.